Hi there. I have selected game-based learning as my module number 2. I have chosen this because I am at the end of fractions with my students right now, and I've chosen it as a fraction review. So I think this would engage students because they love technology, they love game learning, they love to play games in the classroom, but I don't feel like I integrate that enough as far as technology, games on technology. So we have been focusing on trying to use fractions in the real world. So our main question is, how can we relate fractions to real world situations? This lesson is recommended for 3rd grade, and it would last about 60 minutes. So the standard that I will be using is 3GA2 and also 3NFA1 and 2A. So 3GA2 is partitioning shapes into equal parts with equal areas, and then it's expressing the area as a unit fraction. And then 3NFA1 is about understanding a fraction as the quantity formed by one part when the whole is partitioned, so it's more broad, it's not just unit fractions. And then the second part of that is understanding a fraction as a number on the number line, and then representing a fraction on the number line. So that is the last thing we have done in this unit. So students are going to be able to correctly identify unit fractions. Students will be able to correctly identify fractions of shaded parts and on a number line. And students will be able to successfully use and understand the mathematical vocabulary. So far, I feel like my students have been pretty successful with all of these goals in this unit. So some of our vocabulary that we have been using are numerator, denominator, unit fraction, mixed fraction, and partitioning. All right, so some of the essential questions that I will be using are, what is a unit fraction and how can fractions be related to our daily lives? So just like earlier when we talked about fractions in the real world. In order to differentiate in the classroom, I noticed that there is a timer that you can adjust on Kahoot. So all students are given plenty of time according to the question, which allows for more than enough individual think time and time to answer the question. I also noticed that if I were to use the self-paced learning option, which is it would work better for virtual learning because students aren't able to see the question if you're doing the actual quiz, if you're doing the actual Kahoot like you would in the classroom. I'll talk more about that at the end. So students also are given support during the Kahoot game, and they can sit with me, or they can also be provided with manipulatives, which I usually provide all students with manipulatives just in case I keep them on the table. And they would also do the same for completing the assessment as well. They have that choice to have those manipulatives. All right, so just a brief overview of some of the skills that we have gone over this unit. We've gone over identifying unit fractions, identifying equal and unequal parts, identifying fractions that describe a shaded or unshaded area, and fraction word problems, fractions on a number line. So the structure of our lesson starts with a number sense routine. Students will participate in solving and explaining problems in their head as the teacher scribes several strategies. Sometimes we call this a number talk. As a whole group, we will use the Kahoot to review. So students are going to participate in the game to practice the skills learned from this unit. Students will be given multiple choice answers to choose from. Once students make their decision, their answer is locked in, and then when everyone has answered, the game will present the answers that were chosen. Use this data as a conversation starter. So you could say, why is the answer blank correct, or why is the answer blank incorrect? And then students can talk about it. It does not call students out if they are incorrect, though, so I think that's important. It doesn't embarrass them. All of these will create an effective conversation for the whole group to discuss, though, so it helps students understand their mistakes and realize what they need to do on the assessment. Students will use their agree and disagree signals throughout the conversation. The game also keeps track of the students who answer questions correctly and presents their names with their score. So if somebody is scoring correctly repeatedly, and they're also answering them quickly, it shows their score at the top. This will act as a piece of motivation for students as well. There are 13 questions on the Kahoot game. Once the review is finished, that is when students will share what they have learned with their group, and then we will take the assessment. Students will complete the unit assessment individually, and the assessment is based on the skills learned in this unit, so it's pretty much everything that's in the Kahoot. So this lesson will conclude the fraction unit. Students have been introduced and have practiced all skills in previous lessons. The Kahoot game serves as a review to prepare the students for their end of unit assessment. And I think it is important that we're doing it the day of. I always like to do a review the day of. But I really think this technology piece is going to engage them. So the technology used in this game in this lesson is for the purpose of review. The game of Kahoot allows students to answer a question on the device. The time limit holds the students accountable and on task. But also, like I said, I did extend that time for students who need it. The data of correct answers allows for conversation of why students chose their answers and why or why not the answer is correct. And the technology piece will help engage the students in the review and help prepare them for the assessment that follows. I've provided the URL for the game. This is the shared URL, so if it said on Kahoot, like if I wanted to share it with another teacher, this is what I would use. This is not what you would give the students, though. So once the instructor, if I were to do this in the classroom, and it weren't virtual, then once the instructor goes to the URL and selects play, there is a code that pops up on the screen. The code is how the students sign into the game. So basically students just need to type in Kahoot in their search bar, and then they type in the PIN. Another option, like I was talking about earlier, is the self-paced learning option. I discovered this and I didn't know this was an option before in Kahoot. This could be used as an option for virtual learning. This is actually the unit I'm currently teaching, as I was saying earlier, and I plan to use this Kahoot as a future review. When I tried to bring up the option that allows the teacher to display the question and the students to answer the PIN on their device, so I actually used, my son has an iPad because he's in kindergarten, so I actually used his iPad and I tried to bring up the Kahoot on his iPad. But it did not show the questions or answers on the student device. So they would have to come in and out of Zoom to find the question and the answer choices. This would be difficult for students, especially those who may have a learning disability. And answer choices are right there in front of them for this self-paced learning. It gives them the answer choices and the question right in front of them, and it allows them, I think I would also select that they would, if they did this self-paced learning, that it would be on their own time. Like I don't think I would make it as timed, which would take away the competitive piece. But I just wanted to add that I discovered this option as well. This would allow the students to see the questions and answer choices on their own screen. I also provided the game pin. So this game pin is only for if I were to do this self-paced learning with the Kahoot. But if I use the link up top, this is what a teacher can use to select either one. So this game pin down here is mainly for students if they were to do the self-paced learning. All right, so now just to take a look at the Kahoot and explain a little bit about it. So like I was saying earlier, if you press play, you have the option for the virtual classroom, which is what you would do if students were in the classroom and they had their iPads in front of them. This self-paced learning is what you could use if students were doing virtual learning, so they were at home and you were teaching them from online. So just to go over some of the questions that I have. So if I were to do this assign self-paced learning, I could create a new one, and then you can either turn the timer on or off. Then you would hit create. I want to show you what this looks like before we go out. There's also the option to put it in Google Classroom if you are doing it virtual. Okay, so just to show you what it looks like, I start out with, so you type in your question and you also type in the answers. You can add pictures in the answers, or you can add picture in the question. And then you also select which one is correct, so the Kahoot can correct them at the end and can decide which students got them correct and which didn't. Okay, so I started out with which shape is equally partitioned. And then this is another question just like that. So it gave students the pictures and they had to choose which option. And then we went over unit fractions. So they had to choose which one was a unit fraction. With this one, I put a picture in the question and I said what fraction is shaded. Number 5 is what unit fraction in each part of the shape. So they're picking, like if they just looked at one part of the shape, they would choose what the fraction was. And then the next one is what fraction represents the shaded part. So the one before was a unit fraction. Now we're on to using fractions that aren't unit fractions. And then we have what fraction represents the shaded part of the whole. And then I talk about what is the name of the fraction shown. So we also, in the classroom, we've really worked on discussing the language for fractions, because that is difficult. I put in 2 word problems. So I have 2 real life word problems where they have to, and they are kind of long, so I did give them 2 whole minutes to complete that. And I did 2 of those. And then I gave them a picture. I gave them counters and they had to decide what fraction represents the red counters. And then the last 2 are just fractions on a number line. So they had to pick what point B and what point C was on these number lines. And they also had 2 minutes for those. So it does look a lot different when the students play. If they play it in the classroom, I really like it because it gives them, so if I were to hit select the teach for the virtual classroom, it gives the fancy music, and it's really engaging for students. I would usually do the player versus player, and then it would load a game pin. The game pin is about to pop up. And if you can hear, it's playing that music in the background. And this is the music, the same music that it'll play when students are answering the questions. Which, if that were to bother, I mean, teachers know their students in the classroom. And if that were to bother one of your students in the classroom and maybe distract them from answering the question, that option could be taken off by just turning off your sound. All right, so that is my game-based learning lesson, and that was the Kahoot that I made. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.